everybody. I'm Debbie Harris, and I'm an alcoholic. And thank you for that very nice surprise and the thoughtfulness. Um, I I want to thank the committee and for inviting me here because today is a special day to me, as you'll find out in a second. And I just I'm really, really glad to be here and honored to be asked to participate in this meeting. So I thank you for inviting me. There's three things about me. Okay. There's three things about me that I always like to tell you first because these are the three most important things in my life. And without these three things, I don't get to stay comfortable and I don't get to stay sober. And those three things, first of all, are sobriety date. And my sobriety date is February 8, 1976, which means I've been sober 21 years today. And that is exciting. I am now legal. And I know if you're new, you're probably thinking, oh, sure, that really sounds exciting to be sober 21 years, or I'll never get there. But I want you to know that doing it a day at a time is exactly how I think about it. I don't think about doing it a jump or a year or a month at a time. It really is. I think about doing it each day. And this was not my first sobriety date, but it's my last one. And it will stay my last one as long as I continue to do on a daily basis the things I do today. And I am very, very thankful for my sobriety date. I know, like all of us, perhaps we tend to reflect, and I think about this day 21 years ago, and I'll tell you about that later, but that is my sobriety date, and I believe very strongly in physical sobriety. Because if I am not physically sober in all areas, then the things about Alcoholics Anonymous, the steps and the traditions and their principles cannot take effect in my life unless I am sober. But I also know for me that physical sobriety is not where it ends. That's not all there is to it. Because I used to think all I have to do is not drink and everything's just going to be wonderful. Because that's what people told me. Why don't you just quit drinking and everything would be all right? And so I thought that was probably true. But although I never wanted to, I tried this not drinking and it didn't work. I ended up drunk again. And I used to think, well, all I have to do is not drink and go to meetings and everything's just going to be fine. And it wasn't, because under those conditions only, I drank again too. There's a set of steps we read today, and that's what makes the difference. By taking those steps, that's what made the difference. I need to go to meetings and I need to be sober a day at a time, but I also need to do this to make the real change. And so if you are new here today and don't have a sobriety date, I encourage you to get one, because Alcoholics Anonymous make a lot more sense when you're sober. And to me, sobriety is the absence of everything, whether it be solid, liquids, alcohol, thank you, or shooting or snorting form, because the last thing I ever took was 21 years ago. Yesterday, I smoked one lousy joint. And this was the beginning of my new sobriety, was the 8th of February, a new way of life for me. That's why I took that sobriety date. The second and third thing are equally important to me, and that is a home group. I've been a member of the Bellflower Big Book group for the little over 10 years I've lived in California. Prior to that, I was a member of the Skyline group in Atlanta, Georgia, for almost 7 years. And my original home group was the 12 and 12 group in Minneapolis for almost 4. And I believe very strongly in a home group. In a home group, I came in here and you were working with a blank slate. You have shown me how to do everything that I need to know how to do out there. You've shown me how to show up. You've shown me how to have a little job in my meeting, and which made me feel like it was my meeting inside. How I earned my seat in that meeting for that night. You showed me how to do what I like to call work the room, where I go around the room and I shake people's hands and I welcome people in my home group, and I try to do that other places as well. But in my home group is sort of my secret job to go around to the 225 plus people in my Monday night meeting and shake their hand and call them by name. You showed me how to be accountable, how to do what I say I'm going to do. That's very important to me. You've shown me here how to have a little kindness and consideration and compassion for other people, whether it's be sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and allowing them to hear instead of getting up and dancing around the room and getting attention, or being kind to people on the freeway. I was so selfish and self-serving and self-centered, nobody but me mattered. And you showed me how to think about somebody else for a couple of minutes at a time but me. You showed me how to... I don't cry very pretty, sorry. You showed me here how to be a friend. And one of my very best friends is in this room. And not just to have people in my life to use them as I need to. I don't think y'all knew we were getting into this morning. You showed me how to be a daughter. I'm an only child, and you showed me how to be a part of that family's life and how to let them be a part of my life. You showed me here how to be a better employee, because you told me that they really like it when you show up to work every day, not just when you can do it. You showed me here how to get married in AA. And of course, she's also shown me how to get unmarried here. So I have learned from all of you how to do things, though, sober and with some dignity and grace when they're tough. And you showed me how to do that, because I don't know how to do anything out there. And I want to make sure that you know that I know who's taught me all the good and decent things about me. You have shown me and brought those things out in me. You've shown me how to do these things. And so I have a real responsibility, I feel, as a member of my group, to pass that on to those around me. And I believe very strongly in a home group. Whenever I ask somebody what their home group is, and they say to me, well, they've already told me they don't have one. And I feel kind of sorry for them if they use the world in a variety of meetings as their home group, because I know what great solidity it has meant to me, because I never wanted anybody to get too close. And a home group has shown me a family that I have been supported by and whom I have supported. And it's given me a place for roots. It always has given me a place to go. And so I am very, very proud to be a member of my home group. And I hope that if you don't have one, that you will get one and make that place home for you too. Well, the third thing is a sponsor. And as customary for me, I mean, at 21 years of sobriety, I could say that now, I would not dream of being without a sponsor. And I've had 3 different sponsors because I've lived in 3 different states. And all of my sponsors I got to talk to today. And as I do every year on my birthday, I call them and I thank them for their participation in my sobriety. Because without their time in my life at that stage, they were the perfect person for me. And when I moved to the next state, they were the right person for me too. And they all have, when I asked them, and still today, they all have the same qualities. The things I've looked for in a sponsor is that I wanted somebody sober quite a bit longer than me. Somebody who'd been doing this a good while and could tell me when I got in these troubled spots of the phases of sobriety, how I was going to live through it, how I was going to get through. They've all been activists in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they weren't people who went to their one meeting a month and told me to go to meetings. They were all in those meetings and busier than I, and they've all been busier than me. But at the top of the list, they're all people that I want to be like when I grow up. And I have the privilege of having my sponsor in this room, and I don't say that because she's here. It's because it's the truth. That's how I have picked a sponsor. And so if you don't have a sponsor, maybe those will be some guidelines for you too. Because I have found that with these 3 things in my life in an active state, I have been able to stay sober for 21 years, a day at a time. Prior to that, I did not have these 3 active in my life, and I could not stay sober. So I have decided that seems to be the solution. And I'm comfortable, and I live with myself, and I have no troubles 2 inches behind my belly button. And I don't very often today, because I try to stay current. It's important for me to stay current. And so if you are new, or perhaps have been here a while and don't have one or all 3 of these things in an active state in your life, a sobriety date, a home group, and a sponsor, I hope that you'll get them and activate them. Because if you're an alcoholic, we have a solution for you here. This was the last place for me, and it is probably the last place for you. Because prior to this commitment to AA, a day at a time, or this surrender to AA, I had been touched and taught to, preached at, lectured, guided by, gifted, rewarded, punished, removed from, connived and convinced into doing different things. I've been taught to professionals in the religious and medical and psychiatric areas. And nobody but you spoke a language I understood. I'm sure that all these people wanted to get me to the point in this kind of a life, but you were the only people who spoke a language I understood. And when I came back to you 21 years ago, I was really, truly surrendered for the first time. And my life has never been the same since. And I just want you to know that you don't have to keep living anymore today if you don't want to, because here we do offer you a solution. And I hope that you'll join us as we travel this road together. Well, my first drink was the same night as my first drunk. I was 12 years old. It was a Friday the 13th. I've always loved Fridays ever since that time. It was April of 1970. And for me, I remember that night really as if it did happen just the other day. I had been invited earlier in the week by the cool kids in school. And I very much wanted to be a part of this group of people because I looked around the peers that I had, and there were the people who were athletically gifted, and I didn't belong there by any means. And then who were academically inspiring and going to go to great heights, and I know I didn't belong there. But there was this other group of kids that were smoking cigarettes, drinking beer, and skipping school, and they were having some fun, and that's what I was attracted to. And this group asked me to come to a party that Friday night, and nothing was going to stop me from going. I'd heard them talk about drinking. I don't remember them talking about getting drunk or anything, but I made a decision before I even arrived at that party. I had one thing on the agenda for me that night, and that was to get drunk, because somehow I reasoned or deducted that getting drunk would be the most assured way that I could be a part of that group of people. And at 12 years old, when I took that first drink, my reason for wanting a drink was not abnormal whatsoever. I'm 12 years old. I simply want to have a little group of friends to run around with and giggle and pass notes to in school. I mean, there's nothing unusual or psychiatric abnormal about that at all. However, what I did not know was when I take a drink, something abnormal happens to me. And that part I didn't know. And when I arrived that night, and I began drinking at 6 o'clock, I look back, and that little girl that took that first drink didn't need to take that first drink. I had been raised at this time in the Midwest, and my home was about as middle America apple pie as I know it. My mother stayed home and baked cookies, and my father went off to work every day, and I lived in a comfortable home. I've never known what it's like to be hungry or without shelter or without people who care and took care of you, and people who tried to do well for you in education and so forth. And I've never seen violence or abuse of any kind, verbal or physical or any nature. I never even knew that existed until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and would hear your stories, many of your stories. I was totally sheltered from knowing about that. I never heard kids talk about it, friends or cousins or nothing. And so what happened is I never saw anybody drunk either. There was no problem drinking in my home whatsoever. There was no identified alcoholism on either side of my family. I didn't have anybody as a role model to be like or not to be like. I just kind of deducted that to get drunk, you just probably have to drink a whole bunch, and that's what I'm going to do because I just so desperately want to be a part of this group. And so when I arrived and started to drink, not for a second did I think of trying to emulate the way my parents drink, which was they're people that are, you call them social drinkers. I didn't even know that word till I got to AA. I didn't know there was such a thing because all I saw was the way I drank. And my people are the kind that they have one drink that they nurse all night long, and they put ice and mix and foo-foo in it, and they get it all doctored up. And I'm the kind of person that from the very beginning, my kind of attitude is I'm going to take a fresh bottle, uncap it, and throw the cap away because I'll never need it again. And I didn't get that from them. I didn't get them from any role model. That was just instinctive. From the first night that I drank, a lot of things would become instinctive for me when it was regarding drinking. That night we would begin about 6 o'clock, and that would set a pattern for me of always wanting to get started as soon as possible. And they began to pass the bottle around, and I kind of watched what they did, and they took a pull off it to send it to the next person. So when it got to me, that's what I did. And I remember the first thing I ever took was some kind of liquor. I know it wasn't beer, but it was some kind of liquor right out of the bottle. I have never to this day seen either of my parents take a drink right out of the bottle, and yet that would be the way that I would start. And that's what I did. I took a pull off of it, sent it to the next guy, and as it's going down my throat, it's burning. And I remember I never thought of that being objectionable. I didn't not like it or go, oh, pew, or anything like that. I just was glad that something was happening. And I thought, good, it's working. I don't know what it's going to do, but something's happening here. That's what I was glad for. But when it hit bottom a few seconds later, the only way I can describe it, it was like hot velvet. It just went in and it was warm and it went to work. And I didn't know exactly what it was doing, but it began to fill up these holes I didn't even know were there. I was not maladjusted. I was not some weirdo feeling superior or inferior. I was a regular kind of kid. But when I took a drink, it just filled up stuff and made me feel like I'd never felt before. And I liked this. This, oh gosh, where have I been? Where has this been? I just knew I'd been missing something, and this was what it was. And I liked that warm glow be 2 inches behind my belly button, that nothing and nobody'd ever happened to me. And, I thought, oatmeal never made me feel like this. This never did it. And I just know that for myself, what makes me an alcoholic is what happened when I took that second drink. Because I don't believe I'm an alcoholic because I drank too much. What's too much? It always connotates in my mind a quantity, because what's too much for this one is not enough for this one. So in my case, my drinking was time-wise very short. And in other cases, many people can drink years socially before that line is crossed. So I don't believe I'm an alcoholic because of the length of time I did or did not drink. But there's a statement in the doctor's opinion that identifies me perfectly from the very first night I drank. And I didn't, nor could I understood it till I came back to you this last time. And there's a statement that says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. It says very specifically alcohol. It doesn't say produced by cookies or produced by driving. It says alcohol. It has a very different effect to me, and I did not know that. And so when that bottle came around the second time, I did exactly what I did the first time. I took a pull off of it and sent it to the next guy. But something different happened. As it's going down, I'm thinking, I just hope these people accept me. And, I hope my hair's okay. And I hope I don't say anything stupid in front of him, and it is just a very nervous moment. But when it hits bottom and it does its magic, it's sort of what happened is that anxiety turned into arrogance. And it's as if you sort of sat up a little straighter and sort of took a look around the room, and you thought to yourself, now, hey, aren't they glad I'm here? It's just, I have a change of perception. And I took my first drink because I wanted to be accepted by this group of people. And I took my second drink and everything I'm going to do for the next 6 years because I like the effect produced by alcohol. And I don't know that, but that very night will also set the pattern of that I will drink as much and as fast as I can. And I also blacked out and I passed out and I came to with my first case of the dry heaves 3 hours after my first drink. And I had been already taken home from the party, but when I came to, I wanted to get back there right away because I knew I'd had a great time. I don't know what happened. Who cares? But I had a good time. I had accomplished what I had set out to do, and I got drunk, and that was all that mattered to me. And so what happened is that a lot of things happened as a result of that night of drinking. I think for myself, when I took that first drink, that I activated that mental obsession because that Friday morning, other things had been important to me, to be a good daughter and to be a good student and to obey the rules and stay out of trouble. And now, when can I drink again, and how and who and where and so forth is going to become the first and foremost thing on my mind. And this is just after my first night of drinking. I woke up with that thought Saturday morning. I also think for myself that I activated that physical craving because when I take a drink, I have never controlled my drinking, nor have I been able to. I've never even bothered to attempt to because why would you just want one? Why would you just want a couple? I always wanted the full feeling and then some. And I know that I began to change that night, and it was as if that night I walked through a set of doors, and I never did, nor have I returned to the room I left, because I entered a whole nother area in my life, another big old chapter. And 21 years ago, when I came back to you and asked you, what do you do to stay sober, and meant it, I entered a whole nother area and chapter of my life. Well, that night, my drinking at that time at 12 years old would become kind of limited to weekends and at every additional opportunity I could create. And when I was about 13, about a year later, I've been drinking whiskey quite a bit. That had become my favorite. I was introduced to the world of drugs, which in my particular case uh, allowed me to stay conscious longer before the inevitable blackout. Because I'm a blackout drinker. I do drink whiskey out of a bottle with a beer chaser, and that's the way I like to do it. I'm not interested in drinks with fruit and umbrellas and all that crap in them, you know? I'm still not. And so I found whiskey to be my suitor. But what happens, I tend to black out too quickly, and I don't want to be sleeping through life. I want to be in the middle of what's going on. And I found some companions like speed and acid will help you stay awake and help you drink longer, which was the whole point of any evening. And so that they became my new friends. And the last year and a half of my drinking on a daily basis, that was the way I lived. My kind of diet was a bottle of whiskey and a hit or two of acid. And that's the way that had become the normal life to me, the normal life in my mind. Well, I didn't think anything odd or unusual about the way I was living and all the havoc I was causing, and because I was seemingly oblivious to it, I didn't think it was a problem. However, my father differed on my opinion, and he tried all human power to relieve me of my alcoholism. He had tried all kinds of things, and I know if human power could have done it, he could have done it, because he loved me very much, and he could not stand to see his only daughter, to slowly commit suicide, and he saw the future, and he did not know what to do. And so finally, I guess he surrendered, and he sought professional advice, and they said, well, he still had legal custody of me to put me into a hospital for alcoholism and drug addiction, and I'm 17 at the time that I'm committed to this. At 22 years ago was May of 1975 when I was put into this hospital. And I went there on a Friday too. Lots of things happened to me on Friday. I had my first drink on a Friday, and I'm going to be introduced to you on a Friday. And I go into this place, and 17 is not very common at that time. And I was sort of somewhat of an experiment as to how adolescents take to recovery. And I'm unfortunately wasn't a very good example for them at that time. I wasn't interested. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have a problem. You don't seem to understand. Everybody thinks I have one, but I really don't. I just like to have fun, and that's really how I looked at it. I told them there is no way that I can be an alcoholic because I'm not even legal to buy it. You know, how can I be an alcoholic? It made sense to me. I would be in this facility a total of 7 weeks. Most people were only there 4 weeks, but they wanted to make sure that I left very knowledgeable. And so I would be instructed and educated about this thing called alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd never heard these words before. They were absolutely foreign to me. I would be taken, as all of us, to outside meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and those were on Friday nights too. And since I'm not an alcoholic, I mean, I don't need to sit up front and listen, so I would go to the farthest back part of the room I could and distract myself till this thing was over. And I'd tune in every now and then, though, to what these people were saying. And I would find up here why my case is different. But down here in my own small way, I'm starting to sort of kind of remotely identify with them. I don't want to identify, because if you do, you might be one. And I don't want to be one because I'm not one. And so I would hear them say things like, I lost my family because of drinking. And I would know, but that's a good deal. I mean, I wanted to lose my family. They were a constant source of irritation to me. They were always nagging about my drinking. And yet I knew down here it had been necessary for me to leave their home because they no longer had a safe place to come home to. I'm the kind of alcoholic that you hope has had a few drinks, that you hope is influenced. Because when I am in the non-drinking phase, it's that ball of whatever fire is in there, and I'm not a very nice person to be around. And so they never knew what they were coming home to. They were tired of all the things that I had been doing and embarrassing them. And when they saw my name in the paper, it wasn't because I was on the honor roll anymore. And things were quite different. They talked about totaling out cars. And I had never totaled out a car officially. Now, I had a little drunk car that arrived to AA. It was quite pitiful. I mean, poor little thing, I had a mitten stuck in as a gas cap. I never got around to fixing that. And the window had been shot out. And there was, how when you buy them, they're square and they get kind of rounded out with the drunk bumps and things are missing. Because see, I was the designated drunken driver. I didn't trust anybody else's drunk driving except my own. So I always volunteered to drive. And so, but I'd never officially totaled out a car. And that was my thinking. But I certainly, it was not, my car did not come in here plumb. I also heard, of course, drunk driving charges, and I've just identified that I do that, but I never stopped for drunk driving or charged with it. And the reason is because I worked for the city judge. And so I knew all the police, and of course they knew me, and they would stop me and take away my booze and then tell me to go home. And that's why I didn't have any drunk driving charges. And they talked about jails and prisons and institutions they had been in. And my God, people have been very busy out there. And I thought, there are really some serious criminals in these rooms. And it does not apply to me because I have only been in jail 3 times. And every time was a misunderstanding, so that doesn't count. And they talked about losing jobs. And I realized the reason I had a series of jobs because I was losing a series of jobs. And that last year especially was just a whirlwind. I had been fired from a few jobs and I had been asked to quit from a few jobs. But as in retrospect, I realized that last year I developed a very bad habit, and I would quit in blackouts. Well, I don't know I've quit, and they don't know I was in a blackout and didn't mean it. And so when I would show up for work the next day, it was really a surprise to everybody, and very awkward moment, I assure you. And so these are the kind of things that I could rationalize in my mind why my case is different, why I'm not one of those people. But there were 2 things they mentioned that bothered me a lot, that I could not, no matter what I tried to do, excuse myself of. And one of them was they talked about all those broken promises. And I don't know why that just struck me so sharply. Because in my case, the face of my father was just right there. Because it wasn't like there were a lot of broken promises. It was that there weren't any kept promises. And I don't mean to say that to sound super bad or anything by any means. It's because the promises all had "and be good" tagged at the end of them. And in my case, in our language, be good meant and don't drink or take any drugs. And that was an impossibility for me to do. I could go the longest in those first few years, 2 weeks. And by the end of that time, I am so restless, irritable, and discontent. A word I didn't even know was, a phrase that described me so well. I wouldn't have put those words to it. All I knew is that I am just about crawling out of my skin. I need something to make me feel better. And I know I made that promise, but you know what? Too bad. And every kind of care about anybody would just absolutely dissolve. I just became a stone, and I didn't care whatever the price was. It does not matter. I need to feel better. I need relief. And so I know that there were broken promises abound. And that's why for me, secretly, it's so important to do what I say I'm going to do. Nobody ever has to extract a promise from me, because I do what I say I'm going to do. And if for some reason I cannot, I am responsible for that. I take responsibility for that. And so I heard that, and it bothered me a lot. But there was one thing that I heard them say, and that was there was a woman who talked about trying to scrub away the smell. When I took that first drink, up until that time, not one time did I ever blame alcohol or the drugs in my life for any problems. In my mind, I could always push it off on somebody or something else. It was never the problem. I never looked at that as the source of problems. And I heard her say that, and I know that I'd had this funny odor for a long time. And I would try to puff and patter and perfume it away, and it wouldn't go away. And she said it was booze coming through her pores. And the thing of it is that I knew that she knew what that smell smelled like. And she said she was an alcoholic. And she doesn't drink. And of course, I added forever. And at 17, forever is an extremely long period of time. And I'm not interested in not drinking forever. I'm interested in not drinking long enough to get these people's attention off of me, so I can go back to do what I'm doing. But it bothered me, because I know people have tried to instill fear in me. That is a dare. And we just can't wait to start drinking again, to show them they're wrong, or just press the envelope. I don't know. And so I heard her say that, and I just thought, I just might be one of those people someday. But I can't be. I'm too young. I really still had that song going in my mind. And so I would be later sent to an all-women's halfway house, and I got there on a Friday too. That was in Minneapolis, and they put me in with a house that had 40 women in there, and I didn't like women. That's not really where you want to be when you don't like women, is with a group of 40, and they thought it would be good for me. That's why they specifically sent me there. Today, and for many years, that has been a very different story. Women today are the greatest assets in my life. But at the beginning, I didn't trust women. I didn't want to trust women. I didn't like them, didn't want to like them, didn't need them, didn't want to need them. I would much prefer to just go play with the fellows, and I wasn't interested in being around women. And so what happened is that I would be in this halfway house, and I had to do the bare minimum to get by and to stay there. And I did that for 7 months. And that was not drink or take any drugs, which is kind of a no-brainer in a halfway house. But you also had to go to one Alcoholics Anonymous meeting a month. So that's what I did. I went to a meeting a month, whether I needed to or not. And I just thought it was so great for you guys. I just was really happy for you. But I'm not one of you. So I didn't need to be there or get commitments or get a sponsor, get anything. And I know that, I have to say the benefit of the doubt that I'm sure they told me that. But when you have so much cotton in your ears and you aren't interested in this thing of not drinking for the rest of your life, you're not really going to do much to prevent for yourself from drinking in the future. And I knew I would drink again. I just didn't know when or where. And the time came when I came to visit my mother for a 2.5 week holiday. And the first week I'm up in Northern California, she lives, and I was miserable because I'm hanging around with the people I used to drink with when I'd come out to visit. And I mean, I didn't call AA. Why would I call AA? They probably didn't even have it in California anyway. And if they do, who cares? I was not interested in being sober and stuff. But the last week and a half, I was drunk and loaded with them. And what happened during that time is that I had some more things become very clear to me that I didn't want to be clear. I would come in and out of blackouts. And this week and a half was very much of a fog and a haze. The people that I had as friends out there took care of me. But it was the week and a half for me that I learned some things. When I'd come in and out of these blackouts, I would see those symptoms I'd heard y'all talk about, and we've read in our book about the inability to control my drinking and that mental obsession that precedes the first drink, and all of these kinds of symptoms I've heard you talk about. And I knew they were there from the very first night I took a drink, but they're magnified in my mind in front of me, closer and closer. And I heard that thing you talked about, which I really did not connect with until this time. You would say this phrase called "it quit working." And I didn't know what you meant, because in my mind it still worked. I romanticized and fantasized and remembered how it worked. And that was what I had clung to, that it would be the same again. But it wasn't. And for me, the definition of not working is that I can be physically drunk right up to here. It's this that never shut off. My mind never quit thinking about stuff in AA and about call your sponsor, which I didn't have one, or go to meetings, which I didn't want do. All the stuff. It just was very prevalent, and I just couldn't shut it off. And I blamed it on California booze. I blamed it on the drugs out here. It must be. If only I was with my old friends, it'd be different. And I knew that there was that other part of me who'd been to just enough meetings to know that it wouldn't be any different. And so I returned to Minneapolis, and I had the less attitude. I've learned my lesson, and I stepped my meetings up from one meeting a week up to from one a month to one a week. And that sounded like a lot of meetings to me, when all you want to do is not drink and go to meetings. I mean, isn't that all I need to do? I've already taken the first 5 steps in that hospital. Thank you very much. I know anything about 6 through 12 traditions, nothing like that. I'm just not drinking and going to meetings, and didn't have a sponsor, didn't need one, Excuse me. And what happened is that 5 weeks later, it was a Friday, 6th of February, I got a letter in the mail from one of these friends in California, and that letter had one lousy joint in it. And I thought about it for 15, 20 seconds, I suppose, and the big debate, and decided to keep it. Because, I just thought, well, you never know when you might need something like this, to make you feel better. And it was just amazing that on the 7th of February, I needed it, just the next day. And I didn't stop thinking about that stupid thing, and from the moment I got it. And I remember that day very clearly. I really do. I had a bunch of errands to run that day, and that was sort of like my treat at the end of the day. And I got into it. I had smoked that one lousy joint, and there was a great debate within myself. Keep it, get rid of it. Keep it, get rid of it. And finally, it was time to get rid of it, and it had altered me enough to where I didn't like living this way anymore. I didn't like what was happening on the inside. Obviously, this did not alter me the greatest I'd ever been altered, but it did something to me nothing had ever done before. And I had gone out to a shopping center. I got lost out there, and I finally found my way out of there, and I'd lost my car. And I'm searching up and down the aisles for an hour and a half. And I finally find my car, but that hour and a half was quite a discussion with God. And it was for the first time my surrender. And I knew that I didn't want to keep living this way if this was what it was all about. I didn't want to keep living if my life had absolutely no reason, no purpose, no direction. I just don't want to be this way anymore. And I know those people in AA seem to have some kind of a solution. They seem to know how to live. And I think they know what to do and what's wrong with me. And so I surrendered that night for the first time. And I knew that that I was going to do things differently. And that night when I got back to that halfway house, I had told one of the counselors what had happened. And she said to me that, well, you have a choice. I can either get you back into a treatment center in 24 hours, or you need to leave within 24 hours. I said, I don't need more therapy or more treatment or more professional help. I need to get into action. Now, where that came from, I don't know, but I'm so glad that it was somebody else's words I was saying, and I knew I needed action. And that's what I did. I left there, and that was the February 8th. I went to the Old Timers of Alcoholics Anonymous at that place I'd been frequenting, not very often, but I'd seen some of those old timers around, and they'd been always very kind to me. And I went up to him and I said, what do you do to stay sober? And they knew for the first time I really meant business. And I did too. Because you see, my age and your age wasn't asked. It was completely irrelevant. I didn't think about being 18. I didn't think of whatever your age was. I didn't think of what your background was, whether it applied or did not apply. I just knew that I didn't want what I had anymore, and you seem to have something I do. They had a quiet heart about them. They had peace in their eyes. They were standing still in their own skin, and I didn't know how you did that. And I said, well, what we do is one day at a time. We don't take the first drink or anything else that affects us from the neck up. We get a sponsor and someone we can talk to. We get a God of our understanding, and we take these steps, and we practice their principles, and we apply their traditions. We try and be of service and get a home group and carry this message to others. I don't know of anything that has been more consistent in its results than the advice they gave me 21 years ago. It's still valid to me today, and still the thing I try to pass on today. This is the solution for me. Now, I've always not taken the first drink or anything from the neck up, and I've always had a home group. The rest of the things have been in my life the majority of the time, but I'll certainly be the first to tell you I've had many times of self-will run riot from anywhere from 5 minutes to seemingly 2 years. And my first 4 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was in a meeting or service commitment every single night. I would work full time, and I was in meetings at night, and my life was full. I got involved in various aspects of service, home group areas, and our third legacy of service is a GSR and active in the area. The sponsor I had gotten, Marguerite, she talked to her this morning, and she helped me study the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The book to me, prior to her coming into my life and helping me with that, was almost like a sedative. I could take it to bed, begin reading, and nod out. I mean, it put me to sleep. There was no connection. I've heard this with many people, and I came in and I wasn't illiterate, but I certainly felt that way. There was absolutely no memory retention. I could not tell you what I just read, and it was just, there was no connection. And she began, instead of showing me how to read it, she began to help me learn how to study this book. And I have been a student of it ever since. This is my source of information. This is my blueprint for living. And I was about 2 weeks shy when I moved to Atlanta. And I moved to Atlanta a couple of weeks shy of my 4th birthday. And I had known a man before I moved named Joe Phelan, and he became my sponsor down there. He was and still is 27 years sober, longer than I am, and the most active member I know in that area, and still is. And so I asked him. He agreed to be my sponsor. His home group was the Skyline group, and I met twice a week. So I guess at 4 years I decided I knew something. And so I decided, well, I'm new to the area. So I think, I'll probably go to like 2 or 3 meetings a week. Now, this would begin the time, and I didn't really even know it, that I would sort of begin that little bit of self-will, a little bit of self-sponsorship. I know something here. I've been sober a while. I'm not exactly a newcomer, but I made this decision. And let me tell you, going from 7 meetings a week to 2 or 3, which became 2, you do not get the same results. That's why I live the kind of a calendar I live today, because I like the results. I go to a lot of meetings every week. It just depends on the calendar, because I like the results. And in my lifestyle, I've learned that for me, I don't want and can't set a number of meetings that I go to every week. And the reason is because I made that decision. I'll go to 2 or 3 meetings a week, becomes 2. It doesn't jump up to 4, it becomes 2. And in my mind, I get this set, 2 meetings a week, no more, no less. And during that, it's like I put it in a box. I've got this configuration here. But what happens to me is that every day I take sandpaper to it and I start to shave it down. And it's still square, little varnish off. You just kind of wipe the crumbs away, no big deal. And that may be okay for a short while. But in my particular case, over a 2-year period of time, that box, one day at a time, shaving it, becomes a small round ball. And I'm 6 years sober and wondering why I am so restless, irritable, and discontent at the maximum level I have felt. I am bored here in AA. Is this all there is? I'm doing everything they asked me to do. And when I have that kind of an attitude, I'm almost assuredly not doing everything they asked me to do. Or I'm certainly revising it to suit me. And in this case, it was certainly that, because what simply happened, my actions changed. First of all, I certainly had cut down my number of meetings to start with. Secondly, my outside actions had changed as well. I have always been one who shows up at my home group meeting. Now, this isn't every meeting, but my home group meeting an hour before the meeting starts. And now that's getting shorter and shorter, to the point where I know I can't get there late, but I'm getting there 5 minutes beforehand, walking in, get my coffee, sit down, because the meeting's going to start. And same with leaving. I am still one of they're always flashing the last call lights on me. And here I am. It's getting shorter and shorter, to the point where I know I can't leave early, but amen, shake, shake, and you're looking at taillights. I'm out of there. And I am not participating. I'm going in, sitting down, taking, and leaving. I'm not working the room. I'm not talking with new friends. Of course, I have a job, but it's during the meeting, so I don't have to get there too early or stay too late. And I'm wondering why I'm so restless or irritable and discontent. I have stopped being a participant and a taker. I'm treating Alcoholics Anonymous like it's some kind of a punch in, punch out, got that done for the week. And I'm just treating it nonchalantly like no big deal. Well, finally, 3 weeks after my 6th birthday, I thought of course, I wasn't going to tell my sponsor about how crazy I am because he might think I'm crazy or there's something wrong with me. I'll get this worked out on my own. And I did. And about 3 weeks later, I found the reason why I was so restless, irritable, and discontent when I met him. And I like to share briefly about this year specifically because I've seen so many people have this happen to them. And I never heard anybody talk about it and was afraid to. Again, for fear of what they think of me. I'm sick at 6 years of sobriety, which was the truth, but I didn't want anybody to know that. And that I must not be very spiritually fit and et cetera, et cetera. But the point of it is I've seen this thing happen to people, whether it be men or women or parents or children or pets or possessions. It's called obsession. And I met this little fellow, and it was if the light switch of insanity had been flipped on inside of me. And this human being would become the same object type in my life about it being obsessed my entire life revolving around as alcohol and drugs had been almost 7 years prior. My whole life had revolved and did consume around alcohol and drugs. And now this poor little fellow never knew what hit him. And I met him and I thought it's got all the makings that are right. It's a Friday night. Hey, that's an omen. He's single. Now that's good because it didn't always matter. He's got a couple of bucks in his pocket. That's important because I like to do things. And sure enough, he'd been sober for 13 years. Now, he had not been in a meeting in 3 years, but that's not a problem because I'm going to help you. And so I set out to help this little fella, whether he wanted my help or not. And of course he didn't, but I persevered because, see, I knew things would change. I knew I was starting to give God his daily direction and things were going to get better the way I wanted them to be. And, it was a struggle. And I would, I was just as crazy as a loon. I don't know what I look like on the outside, but on the inside, it was a nut house. I would think about, it didn't take long till I did not feel I was getting the proper attentions that I should be getting. And so I started thinking about ways of getting them. And thank God I never took any of these to task, that they only stayed in my mind because too many people have taken them to literal action. And I would think about things. Here I am 6 years sober, and to get attention, I'm thinking about things like suicide. Now, temporary suicide, nothing permanent. Not that serious, I'm thinking about running my car off a bridge, running it into those guardrails, getting drunk at him. And I just, those are the kinds of things that I thought about, but never went out to do. But that's not very sane thinking. The one thing that I did not do, I had about a half an ounce of sanity left about my sobriety. And I knew in the old days when I came back to you, those old timers said to me, you go to meetings no matter what. And I knew that there was no debate or option with going to meetings. And so I went to meetings, but I was certainly no star model member there. And so I went to meetings, but I there. But I also know the minute that I would have made my first excuse not to go to the meeting, there would have been no debate for my second excuse. And I knew the first excuse, and I'm drunk. I knew that, and I was terrified to pick up a drink. And so what happened is that I persevered on this little thing, and after 3 months of this whirlwind romance, of which I was the only one involved, God had thrown many roadblocks in front of me, of course, of which I ignored. But he presented one I could not ignore, and that was the guy got married to somebody else. But I was a good sport, and I let him go. And I seem to just kind of look around the room, and there was another little fellow, very similar in qualification, and we did this dance of death for 3 months, and I watched him go down the aisle with somebody else too. And so finally, and I think mercifully, God said, okay, I think we've probably had enough here, because I so desperately wanted to surrender. I was demanding that I surrender. You know, I just get into this demand stuff. And finally, the day came when it just all emotionally came crashing down for me, where I could not go on anymore this way. And I knew for myself, I am an alcoholic. There are only 2 avenues of surrender. There are only 2 ways of relief. There isn't a third option. And that was either drink, which I had proven to myself no longer works for me. It does not take it away anymore like it used to. Or recommit yourself 110% to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what I did. Oh. And I knew that 100 wasn't good enough. I knew I needed to do the extra 10%, because I'll shave that 100 down again one more time. So I know what to do. And I also know it's my actions that are going to make the difference. I don't get to stay sober on how I feel or how I think. I get to stay sober on what my actions are. And I've always known that. Action is the magic word here. It is the key. That's what makes it all happen. So I recommitted myself, and I went to a convention a few weeks later, and I heard 2 things. On Friday night, I heard that people, places, and things don't make me happy. God, I've heard that phrase. This guy was talking about his drinking years, and I thought, this is me right now, 6 years and some months sober. I'm looking for that to happen. I've heard this phrase a million times, and this is the first time I've heard it and really knew what it meant. Now, I did alter the words a little bit to be men, money, and mansions don't make me happy, which was what my people, places, and things were. But I heard that Friday night, and I began to understand what they talked about, that happiness, for the first time for me, happiness is an inside job. And the next night, I heard, if you've got family business to take care of, you better do it now before they die and you say you wish you would have. God, did that ever knock me over too, because I had one person left on that original amends list, and it was my stepmother, and that was the one I needed to take care of. And I did. When I began going through these steps again, I did another inventory. And it's the last official 4th step I've done, because I knew for me this time, I really have cleaned up and gotten current. Not that I hadn't intended to before, but I was very, very current with this inventory. And it was the shortest one I had written. I had written 3 of them prior. This was the shortest one, and yet it was the most thorough for me, and it cleaned up everything up to that very moment. And I had done another 5th step, and I looked at 6, and this is the time in my life when 6 and 7 became very important to me. For the first time almost, I understood what they meant. That I no longer, for me in 6, I don't want to stay a 3-year-old anymore in my behavior. I want to do what the grown-ups do. I want to learn how to act like the big people. I don't want to be whining and sniveling the rest of my life that I'm not getting what I don't want, what I want. How do they do it? How do the grown-ups do it? And I found that in 7, it is my responsibility to take responsibility for some of the defects that I'm aware of that are a problem to me, and take on the challenges of being the best member that I can, and showing through example what to do. And in 8, I made that list, and in 9, I made that amends, and I knew I was free. And I'll tell you, I don't often tell this story, but When I made amends to my stepmother was really the biggest change for me. I made amends to her. I only had an address, a post office box. I tried to contact her by telephone and could not seem to find her. And so with the permission of my sponsor, this was the way that I could make amends to her. And I made amends, and for the first time I knew I was current, and I had cleaned up totally the wreckage of my past. About a month later, my phone rings, and when I answer it, it's her voice. And I knew for me this amend had worked because no longer was I emotionally gripped in terror when I heard her voice. And I cannot tell you what kind of a freedom that was for me to no longer be in such clutches as I chose and was in when I would hear the sound of her voice and how it would affect me. It no longer affected me, and I had moved into a period of indifference. And I remember before I sent that letter off, I said to Joe, okay, now I'm going to do this, but let me just ask you this first. Does this mean I have to now start sending my birthday cards and Christmas cards and stuff like that? And he said, and I am at a point, I don't care if he says yes, then I will do that. But he said, you know what? Why don't you just let God decide how she's going to be in your life? Okay. All right. I can do that. So a month later, I get this call and we have a little chat, and it made very clear some very important things I've always remembered. Number one, that just because we were in what appeared to be the same event doesn't mean we have the same memory of it. And that I have to be responsible for my side of the street, nobody else's. And that we remembered things very, very differently. About about a few years later, I would be up in her neck. A few years later, I got some calls from her flying through Atlanta at the time. In both cases, I was gone, and I had these messages on my machine. We'll try to give you a call next week. Both times I was out of town, unable to contact her as they were in transit. So now about 8 years, maybe about 6 years go by, and I'm up in North Dakota where she lived at that time, and I had heard that she was dying, and I had heard that she'd been dying for a couple of years from colon cancer. And I knew that my peace had been made with her. I knew that I was current, that there was no panic, that I needed to go get some business done that was unfinished. And while I was still in that general area, she did die. And so the day or two after she died, her brother called me and would reveal some interesting things. And he said, we seem to have a mutual friend, meaning he and I. And I said, who? And he said, Bill W. And he at the time had been sober 5 years. And I had been sober 15, 16 years. And then he said, well, you knew Marianne was sober, didn't you? Marianne's my stepmother. And I said, you're kidding. How long? Did she have a sponsor? Did she have a home review? I mean, and he says, well, she was very sick the last few years, so I don't know how many meetings she was able to get to, but she was sober 10 years when she died. So all of a sudden, my mind starts clicking back into some time frames. And I think, now, when I made amends to her, that means she would have been 2 years sober. I wonder why she didn't make amends to me when she called. And then then the next thought was, well, maybe when she was making those trips through Atlanta and trying to reach me by phone, maybe that was her effort, and maybe her sponsor said, all you got to do, you're responsible for the effort, not the results. Maybe that was her attempt to try to do that. But then the third thought was, it doesn't matter. Fine were made. My side had been cleared up. I was at peace with whatever happened. And it was such a great, great lesson to me to be over something that had been a part of my life a long, long time, and not a fun part either, a very painful part in my life. So now I'm working with more people and active in more meetings and so forth, feeling very good about making that amend. And I'm 8.5 years sober. And I'm thinking of, why can't the enthusiasm of Alcoholics Anonymous just always be there all the time, 100%, always? And I'm sitting in that meeting and I'm 8.5 years sober and in a home group, which is why I need to always be in meetings, because I never know when I'm going to have a question like this, because you always give me the answer. And the guy got up there and talked about being sober a number of years and feeling a little restless, irritable, and discontent. And he said, you know what? It was because I'm trying to live today in last year's program. And that was the only thing I heard him say. Because I realized that's what I was doing. I was still sort of patting myself on the back for making that amend all that time ago. This is the day that I get to be sober. This is the day that I get to be here at this meeting and with you. I wasn't here yesterday and I'm not going to be. I'll be here tomorrow, but I'm not. This isn't what happens every single day. This is the day, though, that I got an opportunity to be here. I totally changed how I think about one day at a time. Completely. Well, my life hasn't gone skipping down the AA tulip path or anything like that. I mean, I've had a couple of bumps in the road and a couple of great mountains. Some wonderful, absolutely incredible dreams have happened in my life that have come true. And some nightmares have found themselves in the way of my life. I'm not talking about anything that doesn't happen in other people's life of difficulties and traumas and so forth. But what I do want to let you know is that I never quit going to meetings. In fact, during the last big bump in my road was about 16, 17 years sober. And I was married and had been married a little about 5.5 years when my marriage decided to dissolve without my prior approval. And I really had a tough time with that. My ego is involved, my pride. This can't happen, shouldn't happen to me, etc., etc. And I'm very embarrassed and humiliated, and it's all ego. And yet you showed me from your example how you go on and how you do this sober and with some dignity and grace. And I found myself a couple of times having a very difficult day. And I just want you to know, I know what it's like to be 16 and 17 years sober and to be in so much emotional pain. You are a zombie. I've heard people talk about being frozen in fear. I don't know what that's like, but I've been frozen in pain. And I know what it's like standing up in the hallway of your house and you are crying uncontrollably. And your legs go rubbery on you when you slide down. And you're sitting on the floor realizing that's where you've ended up. And you look at your watch and you think, well, you can do this for about another half hour and then you've got to pull it together because you have to go greet at the meeting tonight. I know what it's like. You keep your commitments, not just on the good days, not just on the days you feel like it, but on all days. I know what it's like to be in such pain that you feel you are really on the edge of your emotional and mental well-being. And if somebody just goes, you're over. I know how delicate that line is, and I am an activist. At the time that this was happening to me, I was going to more meetings. I was talking with my sponsor every single day. I was more active than I've ever been. I was involved with a convention. I was sponsoring the most people I ever have. And I don't say this to be bragging. I say this is everything it took to save me and my sanity. I have no idea what would have happened unless. I know that even when you're active, I don't get the cloak of immunity to tough days. I still am human and I'm still going to have all kinds of varieties of days. But what you showed me how to do is to do them sober. how to do them with some dignity and grace, how to walk through them and not hide from them, do what I want to do, which is just cover city. You showed me how to do it different. You showed me how to do everything from the very beginning different. And I will always be thankful for that. My days, however, for every day I have ever had, I have had well over a month of sunshine. I have more tears of joy and happiness and gratitude than of pain and sorrow. I have seen what happens when you live Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the life that I have today, and I'm glad to be here with you.